Hey guys, I'm Teresa Barber with Tipsy Couture. Welcome to my channel and thanks so much for watching. Today I'm going to show you guys how we did this cow print on this 40-ounce Big Betty tumbler from Tipsy Magnolia. We did remove the handle when we did this, so it's going to be super easy to show you guys how to get that done and also how to attach it just before your epoxy sets. That way you know that this handle's in here secure and it's not going anywhere. I hope you love this design as much as I do. I'm actually surprised at how simple it was, to be honest. I love it. It's fun. Definitely a fun one, guys. Please subscribe to this channel, head on over to the Tipsy Couture community group on Facebook, and come join us so we can have some fun over there as well. All right, guys, let's get started. All right, so the Big Betty from Tipsy Magnolia. I'm pretty excited about this tumbler. I know that there's a popular brand that a lot of people use, and a lot of them have like a coating on it that stops right here, and it gives you this big crease at the top. And I don't like fighting with that, and I like my designs to go up a bit higher than what they usually give right there. So I love that we can really customize as much as we want of this. These are available in 4 different colors. They have a black handle, pink, aqua, and white. And we're going to go over everything of how to do this. So first off, I'm going to unscrew this top. I have this big old bag that it came in with a bubble wrap. It also does come with a straw. And what I'm going to do first, find a pencil, is because I just want to get an idea of how much space this is going to take up, I like to remove my handle. So I'm taking a pencil and I'm just going around this to make sure I kind of have an idea of how far I want this handle to go out. I am going to glitter underneath that handle, but like I said, I want to make sure that I go super thin. This line will be kind of erased as I sand it, but to just kind of know right now. And then I started to take this handle off when I realized I needed to show this to you guys, so the screws are a little loose. So just get a little screwdriver in there, take them out. I'm putting this in my bag, can't lose that. And I'm also putting this handle. It pops right off, pretty easy. And then we have these 2 little pieces. So that's about how much room. I don't know if you can see how good you can see these lines, but that's about how much room that handle is going to take off. Like I said, I am going to have my design go over this because I do want it to look like it's kind of like a seamless design. What I definitely want to do is we want to tape this up. Definitely do not want to fight with any type of epoxy or glitter getting in here and messing that up. So I'm going to take a little extra time to just get some electrical tape on there. You can use painter's tape if you want, just electrical tape is what I have handy. And I really like working with electrical tape more than painter's tape when it comes to going right up against epoxy, because I feel like it's easier to remove. All right, so get that. Make sure it's closed up. Let me trim that tape down just a little. I like to use an electric sander just because it makes my time a lot faster. I'm going to go ahead and sand this whole thing. I'm also going to sand inside here. I want to leave this part right here stainless. That way that won't get bumped up as the customer uses it and sets it on stuff. So we will end up using our cup edging tool around that. But this inside part right there is going to get filled in to give it a cute little finished look. So I am going to sand inside this little part. For these big 40-ounce tumblers, I find that the Dino's foam inserts fit perfect and it holds them super snug. And it's actually pretty good that you have to cram it in here because they really won't go anywhere. So I put that foam insert in, my arm right in there. We're going to take it outside to spray paint. What I do is I'm going to get the bottom done. We just need it white. Not a ton here, short burst. We don't want anything to get drippy. And then we'll go ahead and get this all spray painted. I keep a dowel rod. I know I've said this a lot, but I keep a dowel rod in here. That way I can turn this in circles and it's a lot easier for me to spray paint my tumbler without having to turn my arm in circles. 2 coats of spray paint on here, guys. So get this first one on, let it dry completely, and then go right in with the next. This spray paint has dried completely and we're going to move on to the glitter part. For this, I'm using West Bank Junior from Mr. Nola's and 504. West Bank Junior is a really pretty pearl glitter. It does not have a sparkle to it. And then 504, it does have a sparkle, kind of like an iridescent sparkle. I like mixing the two. They're both kind of a fine cut glitter. And I like mixing the two because you still get that really pretty bright white, but you also get the sparkle that you want your glitter to have. And the cow, for this little cow print that we're gonna be doing with the alcohol inks, to have a little sparkle under those brown spots is really, really pretty. The other thing is we're gonna be doing this Mod Podge method. We haven't done that in a while, in a long while through here. So we're gonna be doing that. I've heard a good bit of people say that whenever they're doing this cow print, the times that they have used the epoxy method for this, it just didn't, the inks didn't work right. So we're gonna go ahead and make sure we don't get into that problem. We're gonna put a little extra Mod Podge on here. This does tend to dry fast, so go ahead and use a lot of Mod Podge. We can always wipe off the extra. It's a lot easier to wipe off this extra than to have it dry on us. So we have our makeup brush. These makeup brushes is really good. Makeup brushes are really good for this method because the bristles are so fine that it really eliminates those streaks. So you could either use one of those really good Mod Podge brushes or just a makeup brush would be fine also. We're going to get close to this part at the bottom where this handle goes, all around that bottom part, and get this put back on. Like I said, make sure we have everything coated. And then I'm going to start wiping this Mod Podge and make sure that I don't have any spots where it's really going to look clumpy or bumpy in there. So wipe this down. And I'm going to keep all of my streaks going up the tumbler. So we're going around the bottom. Wipe off my extra in that little bucket. And I also see a lot of people do 2 coats with this. 2 coats of glitter with this Mod Podge method whenever they're doing that. I usually don't do 2 coats, especially if it's, you know, something as light as white glitter, but I'm going to see how it looks on here. And if it is kind of too, it looks too thin or doesn't quite have the depth, then I'll go ahead and do another one. All right, so that's on. We're going to go ahead and drop our glitter. I don't like how streaky some of these sections are. See, that's why I don't like doing Mod Podge. I hate when I see streaks. A lot of times whenever you see streaks in your glitter, that's in your glue, that's those streaks will show through your glitter, especially if it's something fine. All right, let's get this down. I know I mixed up enough, but hopefully I mixed up enough for just this initial sprinkle. Maybe I will end up doing 2 coats. All right, dump this in. I definitely could have mixed up more. Yeah, I'll end up doing 2 coats, but we want to make sure that this dries completely. Mod Podge does dry fairly fast, so we have time to do 2 in one day. Such a big tumbler. I love it. I was kind of iffy on these at first, and then when I made one for myself, I absolutely fell in love with this tumbler. I'm going to do another sprinkle of glitter over here. Whenever you're doing any type of glitter application, especially with fine glitter, if you have some areas where the glue is fairly thick, the glitter will soak right into that glue and lay flat. So all you have to do to kind of offset that is to drop more glitter on top, and it will land to where it's a little more even. All right, knock that off, and we're gonna let this sit and dry. While I'm here, I might as well, I'm gonna need more glitter for this next coat, so I might as well show you guys kind of the ratio of glitter that I use. And I don't measure anything. Let me put that paintbrush in some water, close up the glue. All right, so this one is West Bank Junior. As you can tell, it's just a really fine matte white glitter. And then usually what I do is I sort through and I make sure that it's not dirty. Like I have a little purple flake right there. So I pick that out. Move off some of these other pieces that are a little darker. every once in a while from dumping my glitter out on a piece of paper to catch it, I'll end up with that paper being dirty from like sitting there where other glitter was, and I'll have a few strays in there. So I like to go through and clean it up. Do a little more West Bank Junior. Then we're going to add 504. I don't measure, kind of just do it by sight. I want it to stay super bright, but I also want it to have that sparkle. And you can see right here, it has that brightness, but the sparkle is a little sparse. So we'll add in a little more. And that looks about right, because I don't want it to be more sparkle than matte. I'll give it just enough mixed in. All right, so we have this mixed up. Like I said, we're gonna let this coat that's on here dry completely. You can tell when Mod Podge is dry because it will feel really, really tough. Like when you go to feel it, it'll feel like you're almost touching concrete. Like it dries super hard, especially with the glitter on top. So we're gonna let this sit and then we'll come back with another coat. All right, this has been sitting for about 30 minutes or so, and I have my chip brush, and I'm gonna go ahead and lightly dust off the extra glitter. The Mod Podge will have stuck everything to it that was kind of on that first coat, and everything else just kind of laying free. So what I'm doing, brushing it off, is I want to make sure that when I do this next layer of Mod Podge, I don't want it to look cakey. And a lot of the times you can avoid that by brushing off the extra glitter. If I were to put Mod Podge straight over this without brushing off this extra glitter, what will happen is that all of this extra glitter will roll into this Mod Podge as I go to spread this next layer of glue onto the tumbler, and it will just gunk up. It'll look super thick. Some spots will get stuck more than others. So this is a really good way at doing this Mod Podge method without it looking super heavy or cakey or weird or anyway. So like I said, just take your brush and make sure it's all dusted off. Get around this little guy too, because you know that glitter is going to be stuck in it. And all this glitter that I just dusted off is still good, so we're going to keep it. We're going to put it into our little cup, and then we can use this again. My paintbrush did have a little bit of funk on it, so I'm also going to take the extra minute to scoop out any dark pieces. Since this is going to be a cow print tumbler, it's going to be pretty easy to cover up any dirty pieces of glitter. If you have like a darker piece, a different color piece in there, it'll be easy to cover it up because we're going to be dropping that alcohol ink right on it. So we'll put this in. And then we'll start with the second coat of Mod Podge. Get that out of the way in case it gets drippy. I have my brush. I did clean it off and I dried it. I'm going to take our Mod Podge. We're going to go right on with another coat. Again, we're putting a lot of Mod Podge on here because it does like to dry fast. Since we're doing this over glitter, this glitter will hold the moisture from the Mod Podge a bit longer and it won't dry out as quick as if it was just on the regular paint like a few minutes ago. So we'll have a little more time. But I definitely want to make sure I'm getting this on there in a really good coat and spreading it around. Also, this coat will be a lot easier to do streak free. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get this on here. I will do a little time lapse on this so you don't have to sit here and watch me brush it all in perfectly. Besides that, my husband has a drill in the backyard trying to fix the gate, so it's a bit noisy, so we'll fast forward through this. After we get this Mod Podge in here in a nice even coat, we're going to wipe off the excess and then we're going to sprinkle on our glitter. Nothing special to this part, guys. It's exactly like we did the first. Just make sure that you're dropping this everywhere on your tumbler where you just lay that Mod Podge and you're getting all that coverage on there. We're also going to let it sit and dry completely before we wipe it off. It's been about an hour and a half, I think, and this thing is definitely dry. We're going to do the same thing though of wiping off that extra glitter. We're not going to seal this, but we still don't want this extra glitter to fall around and clump up anywhere. So brush it all around. It's kind of funny using Mod Podge again because that's all I used when I first started doing tumblers. And after I figured out the epoxy method and really got that down, I quit using Mod Podge. And I don't know, using this stuff brings back a smell. like it brings back a memory, I should say. The smell of it brings back a memory. It's so funny. Like I kind of like the smell of it. I'm not saying go sniff Mod Podge, guys. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it brings back a memory of when I first started just Mod Podge before I quite realized this was a whole thing. It was crazy. All right, so wipe this good. Make sure it's off. And I'm not brushing this super hard. I'm doing just the same as last time and just enough to get the extra off. All right, we're going to pick up this extra and keep it. Oh, a little fuzzy. And we're going to go right on with this cow print pattern. Get all that extra glitter out the way. It's gonna be so sparkly today. All right, the color I'm pulling for this is teak wood. The more teak wood we add on here, the more alcohol ink you add on here, the more you're going to get that color a little darker. So we can definitely just play around with this and get it to look how we want. I'm going to start over by the handle first because I want to make sure that this little area that I mapped off, kind of remember, I mean, obviously we can't see it anymore with the paint and glitter and everything over it, but I kind of know about how far it extends, and I want to make sure that the design continues under the handle. So we're going to play around with it right there, and you can see how it just goes and does its own little pattern. So I'm going to get that one going up right here, and then I want one to come around the other way. I'm not squeezing the alcohol ink out of this bottle, I'm just tapping it and I'm letting it spread out on its own. Again, we just wiped this off, we didn't seal it, and we're just getting this right on. And look at that, it spreads out and does its own thing. How cool is that? All right, so I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to just put these in whatever random pattern I want. You can definitely control how it goes by tapping it on there and spreading it out. But I don't want them too close together. And I'm leaving these patterns super jagged also. Like they don't have any certain design to them. Just kind of putting them however I want it to look. Look at that. Oh my goodness. As this color lightens up and it sinks in and spreads out a little, it lightens up to a different shade of brown. So don't be worried about the color. Like I said, we could always make it darker by adding more. So I'm going to somewhat stagger these in between each other. I don't want them to be an equal line where like it's all the way around, so I'll kind of stagger them. All right, and then I'll do one right here, going up to the closer part of the tumbler. One around this area. And it's filling in the gaps. Like there's a few little spots where I don't put this right on, but you can see the way it seeps out, it kind of creates that jagged pattern. I am going to go through and make some of these a little bigger to help fill in space, but I don't want to overdo it right now and have it be too much. It's going to be really easy to put more on here and not easy at all to take some away. If you have any spots of your white glitter that may have been a little dirty, as in like other colored glitters are in that section, make sure you cover that up. Like right here, there's a spot of glitter that's probably blue or something. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in. Also, I'm leaving some of these areas, if you can see, let me get that to go in real quick. There's a few areas on here where you can see the white through here. And whenever you look at those cow patches, it kind of does have a little white in there. So I'm not trying to fill everything in perfect. I'm letting these glitters really travel exactly however they want. Also, we're going to splatter some of this on here throughout the tumbler to give some of those other like just random little dots. So I'm not worried about it if it does drop in another spot. Be mindful of it, but don't stress out if it kind of gets away from you and splatters somewhere, because we're going to do that intentionally in a little bit. And you can really see how the brown starts to change after a minute. Like some of these other pieces, they really lightened up into a brown. Get one going right here. And I'm just kind of looking at areas that I don't have something. I don't want to put anything right here because it's kind of close. So I don't want to go up to the top, so I'm going to drop it down a little. And like I said, keep them where they're not super even throughout here. The fun thing about this is that if you wanted to change this up and do almost different theme of cow prints, you definitely can. Like a strawberry cow, and really just play with it. I wonder how that would look if you went all out with rainbow colors and really just changed it up. I know that this tumbler wants a name on the bottom, and I'm definitely going to have that on there, and I think she wants teal. And that's going to be really pretty. I'm excited to have that down. The only thing I am kind of being mindful of is what this looks like as I drop it on. It's so easy whenever you're playing with alcohol inks and paints to draw shapes that you might not find ideal. So I am kind of keeping an eye on how this alcohol ink is falling and making sure it's ending up in a shape that we're okay with. The good thing is that it takes on kind of a personality of its own with all of these drips, and it really does its own thing. Oh, that one's getting away from me big time. There was a little too much ink in this one. All right, we're gonna make this one a bigger splatter. I'm gonna have to play this off somehow because that went big. Needed to stop rolling. We're gonna blow on that to kind of get that ink to stop dripping because that one really started to go big on the bottom. What we can do though is make some of these other ones, and that's why I had these spaced out and I was kind of taking my time with it because I knew I was going to expand on them, and I don't want to have it too big where they all start to touch. So some of these spots that were a little smaller at the beginning, we're going to make these bigger. Another thing that will help to kind of avoid what I just did for that other one is that when you're dropping these on, keep your tumbler that direction kind of upwards like this when we're dropping it, because if you have it on an angle and if you put too much ink, it's going to run sideways like that last one did on us. So put that there, hold it for a minute, make sure it dries. Make this guy a little bigger. And you can really see it spreading on its own. It's just so cool. All right, that will give me room to make this one a lot bigger. Like we said, keep it level so that if it is too much ink and it starts to travel through the glitter, it doesn't run sideways on us, like I did a minute ago. We learned that together. I'm gonna kind of jump through and see which ones I can make bigger so that it's not really big ones next to each other. The good thing with this alcohol ink is that if you blow on it, it will tend to dry a little quicker. So if you have a little puddle on there and you see it starting to want to do something, just blow on it. It'll help spread it out and dry that area. Let me get this piece a little bigger. That piece on the bottom just went so big. I want to make sure it makes sense with everything else. Make sure that stops moving before I turn it. All right, so we'll need, since I have this big patch right here on the bottom, I'll do one right here to kind of play off of that one. That way it looks a little more intentional with it being that big. I almost need a paintbrush to help smush some of that in there. Let me see. Let me try something. Oh yeah, look. And then that also helps to smear out those edges, which we were going to do anyway. Whenever you look at that cow print, it kind of has like a shadow that comes off it. So it was on our list to do. So grabbing this right here while it's still trying to spread is actually doing us a little favor to help smear that out without having to grab any extra ink. There's nothing right here. I feel like this is an empty spot. Let me turn it the other way. Let's make this one bigger. Then I use this alcohol ink to tap around the edges. I forgot to say it, but this part right here is optional. If you don't want the edges of this to look smeared out, you do not have to use this step right here with the chip brush. You can go ahead and skip it. Guys, I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell you that we're using teakwood, the color of this alcohol ink. It's teakwood. We're not using any other color. Adding this in certain sections will give you more depth, and then blending it out with your paintbrush will give you the shadow that you want. So this is all done with that one color. I'm really sorry for not mentioning that earlier. All right, so this is the part that has me nervous. I need to splatter this on here. And that has me nervous. All right, let's see. Ooh, scary. I'm gonna splatter, but kind of hold it up upright. That way, if it is a bigger drip, it doesn't run on me. This is getting everywhere. I'm missing my cup. Like, you guys should see over there. I don't know if you can see it right here, but it's like, whoop, that's where it's landing. I'm gonna have to change my direction. Whoa. The thing I'm trying to be careful for also is that I don't want it to gunk up right here, like to gather around that part. Okay, I don't want to do too much. Like, I definitely don't want overkill. Let's see where it needs a little more. It's plain right here. The good thing about where I'm doing this right now, because I almost sat at my desk to do this part, and I didn't want to, because I thought about whenever I dropped this on here, I know it was going to kind of splatter everywhere. This right here is I was about to say parchment paper. This right here on top of this wood is clear contact paper. So whenever this gets too messy, I just pull this up and set out a new piece. All right, I see a piece right here that needs a little shadow around it, so I'm gonna do that. And then it's so easy. It's so easy to get carried away with stuff, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm getting pretty close to the walk away stage where I set it down and go away from it, so I don't get carried away and it's not completely overkill. But I like the way that is so far. Let me figure out this. And then I have one spot right here where it went and it looks like it traveled, so play that off a little. And there we go. All right, we're gonna let this dry. This ink is sitting in here in some spots. I mean, you saw how heavy it went on. I don't wanna put anything on. I don't wanna do epoxy until it's dry. So this is gonna sit for a while. I have my speed dry epoxy mixed up. Speed dry is from Mr. Nola's Glitter. It is a fast setting epoxy. You mix it a 1-to-1 ratio by volume, not by weight. And it's dry to the touch in 2 to 3 hours. You can sand it in about 3 to 4 hours is when I feel safe. Fully cures, I believe it's like 2 to 7 days. Like, it's amazing. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna start spreading this on. I'll explain what I did to make sure this is dry. So I did not seal this. I did not seal this with spray paint. I don't seal my alcohols normally with clear spray paint, and I have never had an issue. So I'm just going on that kind of that same luck, hope of luck, I guess. So there we go for that. To make sure this was completely dry, what I did do is, besides just letting it sit and waiting, I took a napkin, I took a piece of tissue paper, and the spots that I know that I put a lot of ink on that really felt, looked the darkest and felt like they would still be a little more wet besides just dry to the touch, I took a tissue and I pressed the tissue up against it. If the tissue came back and it was dry, then I knew that spot was dry. And that's really how I just did a guide to if this was ready for epoxy yet, and if this was all the way dry, if these inks were all the way dry. So if you have trouble just gauging by feel, by the way that it feels, a really good idea is to just take a napkin or a tissue and just press it up against that ink. If that ink is still wet, it's gonna show on that tissue. It'll leave a mark. So hopefully that will help you guys. Right here is where my handle is gonna go back on, and I wanna be super careful that that area around the handle is not going to be too thick. So I'm going to make sure that without putting a lot of extra epoxy right there, what I want to do is I'll use my heat gun to help move that around to make sure that this is sealed in right here without being too much epoxy, because I don't want that to be thick at all. All right, we're going to use the heat gun to help work this around. The other thing with Mr. Nola's epoxy is that it really loves heat. It loves heat. It loves to be worked with, so you can't quite go wrong getting your heat gun on here to help make sure this epoxy is smoothed out and you get good coverage. Use my torch. Whenever you're working with epoxy, just remember that your heat gun will help move your epoxy around. Your torch will pop the bubbles. With your torch, since you are using your torch and it gets on here, it is possible to move your epoxy around with your torch, but I wouldn't quite recommend it, just because if you get that torch too close, that flame too close, you run the risk of burning your epoxy. So if you're trying to do one of those designs where you need your inks and epoxy flowing around your tumbler, reach for your heat gun instead of your torch. Use your torch just to pop your bubbles. And that's definitely what I'm doing right here. I don't want to go crazy with it because I don't want to overuse it. Just make sure that it's all done. Again, I'm not wrapping this around the bottom of my tumbler because I'm going to do this bottom part separate, but I will use a cup edging tool to clean this off. That way, when the customer sets this down, they do have this strip of stainless around here that will help keep it a little safe. What I'm also going to do, grab a little cup, to make sure that this area where my handle goes won't be too thick, I'm going to take my gloved finger and just wipe away any epoxy in that area that looks like it may be too thick. And I'm kind of just wiping a square around that area. So there we go. We're going to let this spin, and then we'll come back in a little bit and pull off these little pieces of tape. Okay, so this part right here, I always said pull this off when it's still wet, but we lost power yesterday. We had a pretty decent storm come through, and we lost power for a few hours. So by the time it came back on, it was nighttime and I couldn't. So we're gonna go ahead and remove the tape. It kind of works out because now I can show you guys what to do if everything kind of sets around your tape and you have to really work to get it off. Where if it was just a clean, easy pull to get this off of here, it would have been a lot easier to show you guys. But that needs to stay clean. So what we'll do, I'm going to hit it with the heat gun. took off that little piece of tape, but now I need to scrape off the epoxy that still wanted to not cooperate. So get that off. Just gonna cut this back. And this will all be hidden. This will all be hidden by the handle. I just want to make sure that I'll be able to get in there and have this smooth and have a really nice clean connection from the handle and the glitter. So, and this is still, it's still fresh and soft enough. Like I said, I set it yesterday. Weather didn't quite cooperate, so it isn't completely difficult to do. Take that off. If this was sitting for a few days, then it would really not be fun right now. Sped up so you're not stuck watching it, guys, but just use your heat gun if you have to. Not a lot of heat, though, and remove that tape and soften up that glue so you can cut away those pieces. Trim it close to that metal. All right, I have my handle. Let's pop this back on. The screws face down, so when you put that on, make sure it goes. Okay, good. So that's all where it needs to be. That's really good. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and trim off the bottom and we're gonna clean up the top. This tumbler does need a name on it, but I don't think I can put a name on it yet. I'll have to double check in just a few minutes and see what that bottom looks like. Okay, so let's get this off of here. I have my prep edging tool from Wicked Shimmer. I have it down to the lowest setting, just meaning that all that's under the blade is the black bottom bracket. I have a paring knife that I always wedge in here to hold it a little more stable. I'm not kidding when I say that I'm a little aggressive and my blade tends to wobble. So I always put my paring knife in there just to make sure I can get a really nice clean cut trim around this. And I know you can't see with my hand right there, but I gotta apply a little bit of pressure. And another thing, if I would have been able to do this last night, it wouldn't be so difficult, but with it sitting, this epoxy is a little more set. You can hear it start to hit the metal when it cuts through, and that's the sound you're looking for. All right, that should be enough. Let me grab my other knife. And now we're just going to remove the part that we trimmed. So just get under there. And I always take, this is dull. I know this looks scary, but guys, this is like the dullest knife in the world. So we're gonna take this and I just slide it and I go really carefully along here and just get under this little piece and you'll see it work its way up. I'm sure everybody's just cringing right now. Keep rolling that around. I'll trim off a really nice, clean, pretty bottom. And then while I'm right here, we're going to go ahead and clean all this up. I don't know why I didn't bring this up closer. Sorry, guys. I have my dry baby wipes and my acetone. I always like using, and I'm going to scrape off the glitter that's stuck on here real quick. I always like using dry baby wipes with acetone because they hold together really well, and it holds the acetone. I can hold acetone a lot longer. So put a little acetone in here, just a little pump bottle I got from Sally's. And I'm using my fingernail inside of here to go right up against this line. Trying to see, there we go. Go right up against it, start going in a circle, and we're just cleaning that up. Keep going around. There's that spot that I was using on this wipe. It's still fairly wet, but if I keep running this paint around there, it can kind of smear onto the epoxy. So I like using a new spot to make sure it stays super, super clean. All right, and then we're not doing this outside ring, so I'm going to take a minute to use this right here. Go all the way around and clean this part up. I want to make sure I have it kind of clean down inside of there too. If I just use my fingernail and go all the way around, it'll give me the same spacing throughout this whole area to be cleaned up. I'm still not going to worry about doing the bottom right now. Will still happen a little bit. I just want to get it clean so I can work with it later. All right, and then I have my other, where is it? My other baby wipe and just some rubbing alcohol. What I'm doing for right here is I'm going to take this rubbing alcohol and use that to clean around this bottom part. If you do have any paint that gets in the bottom of this tumbler and your epoxy is fresh and you try to clean that up with acetone, you run the risk of compromising that epoxy. So I always take alcohol. It's a little gentler. I'll still clean it up, and I clean up that whole bottom area. For the top, I'm going to show you, I've had this question a lot this week. This has come up about how I clean the rims of my tumblers. So I have my Dremel and flap wheel. I usually do this outside, but for the sake of this video and to show you guys, we're going to do it in here. I'm going to mute this, but we'll mute it and speed it up for you, but we're just going to take this, run it on a little angle and go all the way around. Whenever you get these, this is flat across. This groove is from using this flap wheel. It kind of digs in and breaks through that area, so they come flat. This groove is created over time by using it. I'm going to do 2 passes with this flap wheel. The first one will remove that glitter off that edge, and the second one is where I really go a little slower and make sure that everything is evened out and it's a nice clean rim. All right, the next thing I do is I get a little piece of Imperial wet or dry sandpaper. This is 400 grit, but it's used. It's like way, way used. And then I take this and I go around the top. Again, this is an outside job. I don't do this in the house on a normal basis, but it was easier to bring everything in here and show you guys than to try to keep up with the noise that's happening outside and show you. So I go around there just to make sure that it's smooth and clean. Do the same thing to the bottom. And then this cup needs a name on it. This epoxy went really, really good right here at the bottom. So I can go ahead, and she just wants a thin name at the bottom. So it'll be really pretty for me right now to go ahead and put that name on here. Let me make sure I have the space that I need for it though. Because you don't want to put a name on a tumbler when it's, need more water. When it's rough, because you'll see the grooves through the, you'll see any texture of glitter through the name. She wants a teal, and the teal that I have would be really, really pretty right here. And that's definitely smooth enough for the name. Whenever I'm working with a handle, I try to do as few and light coats as possible before I get that handle on there. And then once that handle's on there, you're committed. Like the step before that needs to be the last step of your epoxy, just to make sure that handle does go on there really good. So we're gonna go ahead and get this washed off and get a name on here. Nothing special to this step, guys. We're just going to get this name on here. I do have it layered. I find that whenever you're using a decal, especially over color, you get a lot better pop when you have a background color to it. Okay, rushing to do this. I mixed up my epoxy, and my husband asked if I needed the electrical tape that was sitting in the kitchen, and that reminded me that I didn't retape these parts that really, really have to be taped up. So let's get that on there. Completely forgot until he said that. Get this. not taped as well as that other time, but rushing. I can't have this epoxy set. We're using speed dry again. I used some warm water when I was mixing it to help get a little less bubbles, make sure those came to the top. Whenever you add any type of heat to it, it's gonna decrease that work time, kind of like I said before, so just slightly panicking. All right, so still that same thing. Oh, we have a decent amount of work time. Okay, still that same thing. I'm getting this epoxy on here, but I wanna make sure it's thin. It's not all that thick around this handle. So it's on there, but I'm pushing the extra way out the way. Seal up where I had to trim that down. Make sure it gets in and around. Thank goodness he said that, man. That would have not been fun. I mean, it isn't horrible. It wouldn't have been horrible, but just that added thing of trying to remember to clean it is enough. So this layer right here, this is going to get 2 coats of epoxy since I have this name on here. I definitely would not send this out of the door with only 2 coats of epoxy. So this next layer to finalize it all will be a total of 2 coats of epoxy, and it'll be 3 total for the tumbler. And that's if everything comes out perfect with these coats. You know, every once in a while you go to do something and it doesn't quite go as planned. So as long as this one comes out good, well, no matter what, this one's getting another coat. After this one does set, what I'll do is I'll take it outside, I'll sand it with some of that wet or dry sandpaper, make sure everything's smooth, and then I'll go on with that final coat. Make sure I get, and that next coat, that final coat needs to be flawless. Scoot this down around here. And then for this name part, I like to make sure I have a decent amount of epoxy over that. That way it does come out nice and covered. Because the less work I have to do with this, the better. Everything from this point is finalizing this design and making sure that it all comes out nice and smooth. Let me get my heat gun to help get this epoxy to move a little. That will have me make sure I'm getting a really decent sealer on everything. Taking my gloved finger, go around the top. Where we trimmed off that extra epoxy, we want to make sure that seal at the top is reestablished. So we're wiping our epoxy along that top, making sure it fills in where that exposed piece is. Get this all down. And this is just your standard coat of epoxy. Nothing special to this besides just making sure you don't get a ton of epoxy around that handle area where it's really going to be difficult to seal. The other thing we'll do for right here is we're going to make sure this bottom seam where we trimmed off this epoxy, we're going to make sure this bottom seam is sealed back in also. And what we do for that is you get your heat gun, work your epoxy around the bottom just like we did the top, but we're also pushing this epoxy into that seam to make sure that it's nice and sealed up. We're going to clean up the bottom part of that in a minute. I'll show you how that's done. Get our torch, make sure we don't have any bubbles, especially over this decal area. Everything is smooth. That glitter 504, you can really tell the sparkle in here. It gives such a pretty look to it. All right. With some of these metallic looking vinyls, you can really tell when they have bubbles over it. So I'm extra careful on those to make sure that I get a nice layer of epoxy on there, but without a lot of bubbles. So the torch will help you pop those bubbles. I'm going to do the bottom. I'm just hitting it with the torch to soften up the epoxy that fell right there just now. And to clean that off, I'm taking my dry baby wipe and some rubbing alcohol. I'm taking my finger and I'm letting it spin, and I'm just running my finger along the piece of stainless. What that does is it's pushing up the extra epoxy to kind of get it to combine into that. and it's cleaning up any drips that may be going sideways down the bottom of my tumbler. Like I said, we're leaving this part exposed. That way when the customer sets it down, she isn't running the bottom of this on there and it isn't compromising the epoxy. She'll be setting it straight on the stainless tumbler. So keep that going around, make sure it's nice at the bottom. It's all cleaned off around this stainless piece, and that's it for this step, guys. Like I said, we're gonna let this sit. This is gonna go for about probably 3 hours, and then we'll sand it, make sure everything's really nice, and then go on with our final coat. We're just removing the tape right here. I did forget my timing just a little, so I need my heat gun to soften it up just a little. Don't go too aggressive with that heat gun, just enough to soften it and pull the tape. Speed dry epoxy mixed up again. We're gonna go ahead, and this needs to be the final coat. What I did is I took this outside, I gave it a very light sand just to make sure that everything's super smooth, and then I did a sand with the wet or dry sandpaper that I like to use. I put my little covers back over those whole pieces, that way it doesn't go in there. One of the really good things about doing a sand before that final coat of epoxy is that you can really tell which areas needed to get another bit of epoxy. Every once in a while, when you have that shiny epoxy, it's hard to see if a spot was missed. You know, it almost isn't until you go to wash the tumbler that you can see a few areas where it didn't quite go even, especially when you're working with something with like speed dry and it tends to cure fast. Any type of heat you add, like I said before, it takes down that self-leveling process. It kind of shortens up that work time. So we want to be sure that we get that really good, nice coat on here. So we're going to smooth this out. I also took my sander and I went in really close to my handles and made sure that the areas where my handle is going to attach, that it's down a little more and it isn't poking out too much. I also, before I did that, is I put my handles on to make sure that it laid flush and it didn't get too thick, which it didn't. We just need to make sure it goes on there and then it's all put in tight. So we're going to smooth this over. I'm going to grab my heat gun once again to help work this epoxy around. And then we'll use our torch around the end to make sure our bubbles are popped. So again, go around your top, make sure that part is still sealed. I took my wet sandpaper and I made sure that this top part right there was sanded smooth, but I didn't do anything else to that top. Same for the bottom. I used my sandpaper to kind of soften it up a little and just get it a little roughed up, so this layer of epoxy will want to stick really great on there, but I didn't do anything else to it. All right, make sure all of that is down. Going around here. Oh, something fell and I was like, what was that? It was a piece that I took off earlier. It must have been stuck to the outside of the heat gun. All right, then I'll grab my torch, make sure our bubbles are popped. And this, like I said, this is the layer that we want to be as close to perfect as possible. So we're gonna get this on here. Make sure these bubbles are popped, check my bottom. If your epoxy goes around the bottom of the tumbler like the other time it did, then you'll want to take your rag and clean it up. We'll do that just to be safe, no matter what. My torch has run out of butane. All right, so let's take that glove off. Get my rubbing alcohol and do the same thing like we did before. Just let your finger run along this bottom piece to clean up any epoxy that may have went over a little down that side where you don't want it. Okay, the part we absolutely cannot mess up because this tumbler is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. All we have to do is get our handle on there. So we're going to remove that tape. And this epoxy is still fairly fresh. It's been, I think, 2 hours. Let me get... And honestly, this is the reason why I don't tape stuff, just in general, working with epoxy, because I'm so bad at remembering to remove my tape in a timely manner. Okay, get that off, and we're gonna put our handle on. Again, this is a scary part, where to put those screws. Where to put the screws? Okay, pause. I'm a dummy. They're like sitting like right here, like absolutely right there. All right, let's get this handle on. Again, like I said, this is fresh epoxy, so we want to make sure that it goes on in the right place. We're going to push it in there. Make sure that it really sits down into that epoxy. As we push it in, we can see the epoxy kind of come up around it just a little, like we can see it indent in there. When you're doing this, be careful not to touch anywhere else on your cup. All right, so that's in. Have my screw. And I'm just gonna get it started in there. I can tighten up the rest of it later. I just wanna make sure it's lined up right. And as long as it starts going in, I know that it's exactly where it needs to be. Like I said, this will tighten it into place and really make that last part easier when it is time to get it tightened all the way on there. I need my magnet. I need my my screwdriver to be a magnet. All right, get it started in there. And like I said, we can tighten the rest a little later. We just want to make sure that it is in place. Okay, and that bad boy is not going anywhere. All right, and that's it. That's it, guys. What we do have to do once this is all the way to where we can actually touch it and mess with it, we'll pull it off and really get those screws in there really, really well. But for right now, like I said, we jam that handle on there. It is right in place. It's right into the epoxy. You can actually see where the epoxy kind of is up a little and pushed against the handle, so that when it finished curing, it'll be set. Like, you're not getting this handle off. So that's it. That's it for this. Let's let it cure. All right, kids came home from school, so a little too noisy to have this tape running right now. So voiceover it is. We have our Mod Podge. We're putting this on the bottom, a nice good coat, and then we're going to drop our glitter in there. We'll just have it right in that middle piece. Remember, we're not going around that stainless outside part where it's going to be set down, and this is a lot easier to show from before. Once that dries completely, we're going to take our teak wood and do the same thing like we did before. Drop it towards the middle, use your chip brush to give a little shadow around those edges. Make sure it's nice and clean, and then let that sit to dry. After that is dry, we don't seal it, especially since the whole tumbler is perfect. And then we're going to carefully put our epoxy on here. This is speed dry. It's going to sit overnight because, like I said, it was late in the day. But get this all in here, smear it out nice, make sure you have it really covering all of that glitter. And then we'll jump on in the morning when this cures and get our logo sticker in the middle. This has set. I don't sign the bottom of my tumblers because my handwriting is seriously horrible. But I do have my logo sticker that I always put on the bottom. And it says, not dishwasher safe, avoid heat, do not soak, do not drop, handle with care, not microwave safe. It's sticky on the back. I don't need my heat gun, but I like using my heat gun on there because it really softens up that glue on the back of it. And I'm able to push it in and make sure all the bubbles are out and it is on there tight. I notice a difference between using my heat gun to get this on there and then just putting it on regular. This will cover the bottom with UV resin just to seal this back in. We don't need a lot. It's just covering this up. Of course, I was not prepared with the glove. And then we're gonna set this out in the sun and that's it. So let's see, get my glove on. Smooth it out. Go right up against that edge. And then we'll do the same thing to clean it off. This UV resin is really good. It sets super, super fast just out in the sunlight, and we have a ton of sun today, so that's where this is going. All right. Hit my heat gun with it to make sure that it all levels out. And I need a baby wipe and my alcohol again. Make sure that my rim, this bottom rim, is clean. Just gonna go around. And I just make sure it's all the way nice. That way it doesn't, water can't get inside of that. There's one spot right here. There we go. All right, so I'll set this on the out in the sunlight, and that's it, guys. That's all there is to this tumbler. It's super easy. Comes out really cute. I hope you like this tutorial. Please let me know if you have any questions. If there's any other designs and tutorials you want to see, let me know in the comments section. Please subscribe to this channel. We're getting close to 10,000 members, and as soon as we do hit that, we're giving away a bunch of stuff: a Cricut Explorer Air 2, a 3-cup turner, a ton of epoxy, glitters, gift cards to a few places. So it's gonna be great, guys. So please subscribe to this. Join me over at Stippy Couture Community on Facebook, on our Facebook page. And that's where we have all of our lives, coupon codes, and giveaways. So thanks for hanging out, guys, and I'll see y'all soon. Okay, so a voiceover because my boys are here and it's kind of loud. So what we're doing right now is we're just getting the Mod Podge and glitter down just like we did the rest of the tumbler. You don't need a ton of this Mod Podge, but still keep in mind that it does tend to dry quick along this paint. So go ahead and get that on, then go ahead and drop the glitter, wait for it to dry completely, and then we're going to drop the inks just like we did before. We're only going to do 2 big spots on here, one on each side, and make sure it extends to that middle part because that's where I'm going to put my sticker after we get the layer of epoxy on there. But super easy step for this one.